But we also want to celebrate International Men's Day, which is today. It's a new date in the calendar, a date which is unheard of a few years ago. Indeed, if it was mentioned at all, it was to raise eyebrows in puzzlement and perhaps elicit a few guffaws into the bargain. But it is becoming established. It's becoming recognized as a date in the calendar. Indeed, only a few weeks ago, in the House of Commons, Theresa May made a remark. She made a reference to International Men's Day, and she recognized its importance as a date for men and for talking about the men's issues. So let our own politicians take note. These are tough times for men. They have been for quite a few years, but they are now reaching a new intensity. There is further legislation, damaging legislation, which is imminent. It's coming down the tracks. There's a real disregard of men's issues, of the real suffering, very real suffering of men by the major institutions of our state, by government, press and media, by academia. There's a stubborn disbelief that men can actually have problems. How could they? How could men have problems? It's often more than a callous indifference. It often amounts to a real hostility. Because how often are we told, you know, the old phrases, men have it all, it's a man's world, most positions of power in the state are held by men, but by and large men don't stay at home to look after children. Since the 1940s, Western society has developed a social conscience, whereby groups in society that are seen to be in trouble, that are suffering, are offered a helping hand. They are met with a sympathetic response. This applies in particular when those groups are minority groups of different kinds, and also to groups that were seen not to have gotten a fair deal in the past. But there's one big exception. It does not apply when those groups are men. Instead, we regularly hear that men are failures. They're responsible for all the ills of society, political, social, economic. And if men's problems are raised at all, if they're mentioned at all, to heap insult on injury, men are actually blamed for their own problems. You've heard this phrase, oh, it's all down to the patriarchy. It's all due to the patriarchy. That's what's responsible. It's a single, all-purpose whipping boy, this patriarchy. And it's offered as an explanation, a one-line explanation for all the complex ills suffered by men today. And this, you know, passes for serious discourse in some quarters, scholarly discourse. Now, children deprived of their fathers do miss out, but boys in particular miss out. Boys deprived of their fathers carry an added burden, evidence for which is accumulating. There is a high correlation between fatherlessness and many of the ills, many of the problems, social and behavioral problems which affect boys today. And this is becoming well documented. For instance, youth suicide, boys running away from home and becoming homeless, boys doing badly at school or dropping out of school or developing addiction problems, boys getting into trouble with the law and being put in jail. There is a great mantra of our time, and it's written up there in big lights. It's called equality. And we, in our society, pride ourselves on our equality, and we're never tired of complimenting ourselves about it. But it's a sham when it comes to equality for men in many of the issues that I've spoken about. So I've talked about some of the resistance, some of the hostility which men face today. And let it be said, some of this comes from other men. Men who have bought into this propaganda about the patriarchy or are duped into believing that men are so badly flawed that they're in need of remedial treatment. There's a great deal of intolerance towards men which goes unrecognized and unchallenged. And that was one reason why Men's Voices was set up in the first place, to be some small effort, some small step in trying to fill this void. Okay, I have spoken a good deal about the problems facing men today, and they are real, but it's not all doom and gloom. There are real champions emerging to campaign and to speak about men's issues. I can think of a few. Warren Farrell in the US, writer, broadcaster, author. Peter Lloyd in the UK does a like work. And only recently I became aware of a person closer to home who does an excellent job. His name is Dave Cullen. He works online, and he operates under the banner Computing Forever. And he makes the most wonderful videos, which you can see on YouTube, across a whole range of issues. And this guy speaks straight from the heart. He's well informed. He doesn't pull any punches. He says what needs to be said. He doesn't spare feelings, and he's not afraid of offending powerful interest groups either. Lastly, in order to wind up this opening address, I want to go back to a statement that I made at the outset. We're here to celebrate. We're here to celebrate International Men's Day, and we're here to celebrate masculinity. Yes, we're here to celebrate masculinity, that much abused concept. In spite of all the naysayers, we do celebrate it. We do affirm it. And we want the word to go out to men and boys in particular, who may be inclined to hang their heads, to feel dismayed. And our message is, do not be dismayed. Hold your head up. Affirm your masculinity, because it is worth celebrating. Thank you very much for that.